You're listening to the Diagnosed Podcast, where every diagnosis has a story, and every story deserves to be heard. From survivors to loved ones, we explore the journey together with your host, Albano.
Yeah, I'm just super glad that you found some time for us, because I've been following you for a little while, and you have quite the story when it comes to what you do for a living, your health issues and struggles that you've gone through, and then more than that, everything that you're doing to give back. And that's kind of where I'm interested. So anyway, without further ado, let me just start off by saying that you're a strength coach. You're a physical therapist.
Yep.
Strength coach. You were also known as Unbreakable online. That's your handle.
You got it. Yeah. Jared.unbreakable on Instagram.
Right. And yeah, that's it's a cool name, because I think it has multiple meanings for you. Am I right?
It is. Yeah. I chose that name when I relaunched my coaching business in 2020. And I thought it stood for the values that I had as a person, as a coach, and what I wanted to impart for my clients. And it's taken on additional meaning since.
Yeah. I would have thought that name came subsequent to your health issues, but you're obviously saying that you had that name. So it was just very fitting. It was almost like it was meant to be based on what happened after that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I want to get into a few things in a little while, but I want context first to kind of set the theme of where we're going with this, and what it is that you do and why you do what you do. Your positions in life and how you give back. So you had some physical challenges, some health challenges, HLH, autoimmune disease. Is that correct?
You got it. It was described to me as an autoimmune disease, technically a hyperinflammatory disease, but it manifested similarly. Yeah.
Can you walk us through that experience, how you knew you had it, and then your story of dealing with it?
Yeah. So we got to go back to the New Year's Day of 2023, where my family and we went over to see my parents. We had a great visit, came back home. I started feeling sick. I didn't think too much of it. It was the usual sort of malaise and fatigue. My wife and my daughter said the same thing. It's cold and flu season, so, kind of shrugged it off. The first indication that something was different was that a week later, they were all feeling better, my wife and daughters, and I was getting worse. So the malaise and fatigue continued. It turned into insomnia, which I had never experienced before. And that was very strange and more than inconveniencing. I also had this intense sinus pressure. So we went to see my family doctor and actually saw the nurse practitioner. And both the nurse practitioner and I both thought this sounded like a sinus infection. Got antibiotics, nasal spray, back home I went. Several days of taking the antibiotics, expecting something's going to help, and nothing did. In fact, things kept getting worse. The insomnia is continuing. It's getting worse as well. My lymph nodes at this point are starting to swell to the point where the best description that I have is, those topographical maps where you run your fingers along the mountain ranges, you can feel the ridges.
Right.
That's what my neck and my shoulders felt like. And I knew something was very, very wrong here. So my wife and I went to a smaller ER at a smaller hospital because we live out in the countryside. Was seen by the doctor and was diagnosed as having mononucleosis, which was strange to me because mono was the kissing disease, which I'd never had. My wife had never had. We'd been married for a while, and I didn't know how on earth I would have gotten mono, but apparently that's what I had. And the doctor prescribed a sleeping medication to help with the insomnia, and away I went. It was 3 days after that another sleepless night. And I was sitting at the kitchen table feeling absolutely miserable. And my wife looks over at me and says, "You're yellow." And we both think, oh crap. Because we know something's wrong with my liver. I'm a physical therapist by trade. Jaundice isn't something I encounter a lot, but I know it when I hear about it. So we knew we had to go to a larger hospital. Called my mom. She came to watch our daughters. This was January 23rd of 2023 now, the day before my twins' 5th birthday. And my wife parked the van in the ER parking lot, and the door was probably 20, 30 feet away, give or take. And I've been active for most of my life. I grew up as a fat kid, not athletic, made fun of for my weight, picked last for recess and gym class. We tried different sports, nothing stuck. The first thing that I took to as far as physical activity was martial arts, kung fu. Could have been because I grew up watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and I wanted to be the Red Ranger. Could have been because I got to hit people and no one told me I couldn't. It was something. But kung fu was the first thing. Gave me a taste of confidence, which then laid the foundation for me to then go out for high school football, which I played for 3 seasons, which then got me in the weight room because the coaches needed us to train through the summer between our junior and our senior year, grade 11, grade 12. And then once football was finished, I now was not on the field for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. So what was I going to do but continue to lift weights? Because it was another hit of confidence. I got to see how my body changed. I liked how it felt. It kept building up the confidence so I could talk to girls, and that continued to be a focus through undergrad, which then led to training for natural bodybuilding. Never competed, but that was the goal. And then powerlifting, which I still do. So all that to say, like I've spent probably at this point 16-ish years really being able to rely on my body, knowing that it can do some cool things. And in this ER parking lot, I'm having serious doubts about whether I can finish walking those 20 or 30 feet into the ER entrance, or if I'm going to pass out and need my wife to get a wheelchair halfway through. We get in the ER. The nurse takes my blood pressure and heart rate. My heart rate's racing around 200 beats per minute just from getting up out of the van and walking in. Heart rate or blood pressure spiked. And then when we go to the registration window to register, I tell that nurse I'm going to pass out. And I very nearly do. So I was admitted that night. And then began the 6-day marathon from hell, where my memory starts to go fuzzy here, because this is where the delirium was setting in. I was put on extra, supplemental oxygen. And then there was this stream, over the hours and the days of all sorts of medical personnel, nurses, different physicians and specialists, monitoring me, trying to get a history from me and from my wife to figure out what's going on, what tests do we need to run. And my wife told me later that the scariest moment of her life was in that 6-day stretch where seeing her big, strong husband, I stand 6 feet tall, I was about 194 pounds at the time, her big, strong husband, so weak and so incapacitated that he couldn't even get up and go to the bathroom on his own. She's wondering, how am I supposed to go home to our 3 little girls, who are 2 of whom are twins, are turning 5 the next day, and our youngest is 2 at the time, and explain that daddy's not coming home. She doesn't know if he's coming home. She became a single mom overnight. So in these 6 days, I'm continuing to get worse. My throat begins to bleed through hemorrhagic tonsillitis. They're taking continuous blood draws. They're sending me for tests and scans. And on that sixth day is when we finally landed on the diagnosis of HLH, which stands for hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. It was described to me as an autoimmune disease. It's technically referred to as a hyperinflammatory disease, but what happens in it is the body's immune system gets so revved up that it attacks healthy cells, especially red blood cells.
And this would explain your lymph nodes swelling up.
Correct. Exactly. The lymph nodes, my spleen, which is the largest lymph node in the body, that was massively enlarged. And the mortality rate for HLH, which can be primary or secondary. Primary just means it has a genetic component. Secondary means that it's brought about as a result of either a different autoimmune disease, a cancer, or a viral infection. And I was lucky door number 3 from influenza A, which then led to mononucleosis, which is related to the Epstein-Barr virus, which can be a sneaky virus and it can lie dormant for a long time, and then led to this whole spiral and storm for full-blown HLH. And for secondary HLH, the mortality rate is somewhere between 50 and 75%.
Wow.
So at best, there's a coin's flip chance of me getting back home. And that was the night they put me on life support. I was on life support for 5 weeks. Ventilator, dialysis, near constant blood draws and blood work. I had an NG tube, and they use that for medication and also to try to give me some nutrition. And through all this, they're doing their best to treat the HLH as per the protocol. HLH is rare. We do have protocols, and my team consulted with other specialist teams from Hamilton and Toronto, just to figure out how best to try to help me. The protocol is chemotherapy, corticosteroids, sometimes monoclonal antibodies. But then also, because we're talking about being as sick as I was and others are, you're trying to fight off and prevent the other infections that come from being in the hospital and having your immune system just so totally wiped. So the double-edged sword here of having a treatment protocol as we did, and having something as important as chemo and as brutal as chemo, is that my body was so ravaged by the HLH that they couldn't give me the full doses of the chemo that I was supposed to get. It was this constant coordination between my hematologist, who headed up my medical team, and the pharmacist, and the nurses who were on shift and taking care of me, to see where my vitals were and what dose of chemo I could probably handle without significantly making things worse. So they run through this. I'm unconscious through this whole time. And, several weeks into this, I think it was around week 2, maybe week 3, I'm continuing to get worse. They're doing all they can. We get down to the last treatment. They give the treatment, and I'm still in the nosedive.
So let me jump in for just a quick second.
Yeah.
When you say treatment, are you referring to chemotherapy?
At this point, the chemo has been given and it's still not having an effect. And the last treatment here that my hematologist queued up was rituximab. It was a monoclonal antibody. And it was framed as like, this is the last thing that we can try. And they administered it. were watching for the changes, didn't see it. And my parents told me afterwards that my hematologist told them, his body's going to do what it's going to do. And you should start getting ready to talk about end of life decisions and to start getting ready to say goodbye. Obviously, I'm still here. And all I can tell you about what changed after that moment where my doctor signaled like we're at the end point is there was an awful lot of prayer being offered by a lot of people. And I can just also tell you that the doctors and nurses who were with me and oversaw my care all through the downward spiral, and then also saw me pull out of that nosedive when I shouldn't have. They gave me the nickname Miracle Man on the other side of that. These people whose job it is to treat, the sickest people, and with a disease like HLH, like others, I'm sure, the survival rate is not great.
Yeah, I wanted to, if you don't mind, I wanted to just add a little bit of context to what you're saying, because I'm listening to your words,
Mm-hmm.
and because I know your story, and I follow you, and I've seen many of your posts throughout this journey. So while you're speaking, I have a visual.
Yeah.
I can see you in that state. A lot of people who are going to be listening to you here may not have that same connection, let's
Yeah.
say. And, it's, you went through a lot. I mean, I remember watching videos that you've posted of them literally lifting you mechanically out of bed. And a lot of that is just not being captured right here. So I just want to kind of put a little bit of context. I think you're being a little humble, for what you went through, but
Yeah.
but it was
There's a lot.
obviously very, very dramatic, and it was very intense.
Yeah, I mean, we can pull back the curtain all the way here, because at this point, even as I came out of the nosedive, where we were no longer talking about end of life, even though they just were, it doesn't mean that I was well, because this is where my memory firsthand starts to kick back in. And again, I walked into that ER, sick as I was, but 6 foot, 194 pounds, pretty solid athletic background. And when I woke up, I felt like I was waking up in a different body. I was literally strapped to the table or the bed, because the sedatives they had to give me, they affect people differently. For me, it made me paranoid. And I had these weird, almost psychedelic dreams while I was on life support, which has to be my brain trying to make sense of the situation and affected by the drugs. Some of which involved me taking out tubes, which I found out later I actually did in real life. And so they had to restrain me, which was also a super painful decision for my wife to make. She was there. My wife and my mom especially traded off 12-hour shifts. My wife was there that day. My mom might have been too. But I wasn't fully conscious. And my team was telling my wife and possibly my mom, hey, look, we have to restrain him for his own safety. And I can overhear it, and I'm yelling from the bed, I don't consent. So there's a heart-wrenching decision among many that they have to make on my behalf, because I'm not present and I am a danger. How do we keep everybody safe, even though I am saying I don't want that?
And when you're saying you don't want that, is that just in your head, or were you physically saying
No,
that?
I was saying that out loud.
Okay.
My wife and my mom told me afterwards, like, I said that out loud. I don't have a firsthand recollection of it.
Right.
But like, I was saying it out loud, which made that decision all the harder for them, because they knew that it was in my best interest, but it was going to be painful, emotionally painful for me to go through that, even though I wasn't all cognizant. So I wake up in what feels like a different body. because though they gave me nutrition for those 5 weeks on life support, the inflammation in my intestines made it so I couldn't absorb it very much at all. So I woke up 40 pounds lighter. And all that muscle came from those years that I'd spent, particularly in the weight room, first for football, then bodybuilding, then powerlifting. And my body used that as fuel to buy me time while I was on life support. But that meant that I woke up at 6 foot, weighing about 150 pounds.
And this was in a span of 5 to 6 weeks?
5 weeks on life support. Yes, sir.
So you averaged about 10 pounds a week.
That's it, man.
More or less.
That's how she went. So what that meant then is, as I woke up, I couldn't speak because I had the ventilator down my throat, which they then had to shift to do a trach because they could only leave it down your throat so long. But I couldn't speak. Once the restraints came off, I was so weak that I couldn't hold my phone above my face. It kept slipping because I didn't have the strength in my fingers. And if you told me that my life or my family's life depended on me being able to get up out of bed and stand up, there's no shot. I have not been that dependent on other people for everything since I was probably 2. And you mentioned the mechanical lift. Yeah. Because I lacked the ability to sit up and stand and walk and breathe on my own. I needed supplemental oxygen. So you want to talk about a head trip or a paradigm shift, me going from, training for powerlifting I started training for that in 2014. I'm used to picking up a barbell with hundreds of pounds and, doing that on the regular. My workout became being lifted out of bed and sitting upright in a chair for 10 minutes. Because just being upright against gravity, that was difficult, and I could only do it for 10 minutes at a time. I was skin and bones. My left hand was blackened because an IV with medicine, it went interstitial. Instead of being in the vein, the medicine stayed in the tissue, killed off that tissue, went necrotic, then needed a skin graft later. I was in rough shape, man.
At what point did the doctors or your family, I mean, they would have had conversations, but at what point did they realize that you're pulling through? Like this talk about end of life was a little premature, and the miracle man is coming through this.
Yeah. It would have been at the point where, towards the end of those 5 weeks, which timeline wise, that puts us at the end of February, towards the end of February of 2023.
But was it a specific treatment or something that put you over to that recovery side?
No, it was.
Or was it just time?
It was time, but also in the context of they're closely watching all of my vitals and running all these tests. They give the last treatment, which is framed as such. They're seeing the decline continue, prepping my family to say goodbye. And at that point, that's where I had no business turning around the way that I did or coming out of the nosedive. But that's where things start to stabilize. And they start to realize, okay, he's not spiraling. He's not good, but he's not spiraling. And that begins the process of starting to wean me off of life support. And then that takes us to end of February, early March, where my firsthand memories come back being in the ICU. And then comes the challenge or the realization for me, there's a long road out of here. Yeah.
So what did that look like in terms of the long road ahead for you? After 6 weeks, after you being somewhat conscious now, what are they telling you that recovery is going to be like for you?
I can't remember that they could give me a clear picture at all. HLH being a rare disease, my team was pulling what resources they could on their own, and they were again consulting other teams. But they couldn't give me a clear time frame of what recovery is going to look like. Recovery for me very much came down to a day by day and often hour by hour kind of game plan, where knowing how dependent I was and how frail I was in all respects, we had to build from the ground up. That meant that in addition to the constant monitoring of vitals and treatment of the infections from the hospital, I had cellulitis, I had a fungal infection. They had me on antifungals, antibiotics, like a whole concoction of drugs to fight off the hospital-acquired illnesses. We also were starting from a place of like ground zero for physical fitness to do even, basic care. So that meant that in the meantime, the nursing staff, they were the ones who were lifting me up so they could put a bedpan under me. They were the ones who were brushing my teeth. They were the ones who were giving me, my washing with my cloth baths. They were taking care of the basic needs here and there, or in the here and now. And we had to begin physical therapy, which started off with trying to get up out of bed or sit up in bed and then do some trunk exercises. And again, as a physical therapist, it was both a help because I understood what was going on, not just on the PT side, but in general. And it also made it a whole lot harder because I understood the gravity of the situation and just how much there was to overcome. And no one could guarantee how far we were going to go or how fast. There's PT, there was occupational therapy because I also had tremors where I couldn't write because every time I tried to move my hand would shake, didn't have the fine motor control. We had to relearn how to dress, speech language pathology. They came in to help work with me so I could relearn how to swallow safely. Because like any other muscle, the muscles in your esophagus and in your throat, you don't use them for 5 weeks. They're going to atrophy, which meant that I was not allowed to eat or drink anything, which when I tell you, Albino, that I had I would have committed several large-scale crimes for a single cup of ginger ale. I mean it. But I couldn't have it. So I had to work on swallowing, chewing ice chips, we were rebuilding from the ground up in all the respects. So to your question, what the expectation was, I don't know that there was much of an expectation other than this was going to be a long haul and it was going to be hard. And they, as in the team, they were going to do all that they could to support me. And I'm extremely grateful that I got to work with them and had the support in place, as I recognize that's not the case for everybody. And beyond that, it was like, we're just gonna see how it goes.
How much of this was done with you as an inpatient versus them releasing you and you continuing the physical therapy?
3.5 months.
I would imagine they wouldn't let you leave the hospital in that shape after just a few weeks.
Sure wouldn't. No. So about 3.5 months, close to that, is what the total time I spent in the hospital. Was admitted January 23rd into the ER, and I left May 1st. So life support was 5 weeks. I was still in the most intense ICU. They had 2. I was in ICU A to start. And then as I slowly started to improve, and again, just so it's clear for anybody listening, I was not good by any means. I was still very ill. But as I started to be less critical, they moved me up to ICU B, which had a little less intensive nature to it. And then I spent the most amount of my time in the hospital in the oncology unit. I didn't have cancer, but HLH has a cancer-like progression, and my hematologist also specializes in cancer care. So that's where I spent the most time. But you're right, they didn't let me go home yet. And even the decision to go home was not immediate, sorry, that's obvious, but towards the end of it, as we're doing PT, as we're doing OT, we're doing all the things, we had to make a decision of whether I was going to go home and what level of care I needed there, because there would be some community PT, but my wife's not a nurse. My wife's also taking care of our 3 little girls as a full-time mom. So we couldn't let me go home. I couldn't go home and now put that responsibility of a full-time nurse on her. The other option was, do I go to a rehab facility for some additional work, additional weeks of rehab to then go home? We wanted to keep that option open. And one of the things that came from it is a rehab facility won't take you if you have an NG tube, that tube down through the nose, down to the stomach. So we had to switch that for a G tube, one that goes straight into the stomach through your abdomen. I still have my scar from that. And yeah, like that, putting that in hurt. That procedure sucked, and maintaining it sucked, but we did it so that we could keep the options open. When it came down to it, as we had these conversations, I'm so grateful for all the doctors who were involved in my care. Very grateful, and I recognize how unusual it is to say that. But one of them in particular, she and I were talking about this decision, home or rehab facility. I just leveled with her. I'm like, I am so homesick. They put me on antidepressants. And I'm so glad they did for those last few weeks. And I continued to take the antidepressants for a while after, because this was all traumatic, as it should be obvious from anybody who's hearing it. But I just told her, like, I don't know if I can do it mentally. Physically, I see that it makes sense. I don't know that I can hack it mentally. I think I need to go home.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're rolling it into the mental aspect, because that's one of the things I really wanted to touch on. But we're gonna come back to that after you finish your rehab journey.
Yeah.
But the mental aspect is, I think, a gift, and I really want to zone in on that. But
Yeah.
let's just continue your rehab process.
So leave the hospital May 1st, and, just adjust my chair real quick. My chair is sinking with the weight of what we're talking about.
Well said.
So head home. And going home, again, doesn't mean that I was well. I was still entirely bedbound. I say entirely. It was an effort to get up and go to the bathroom, and I often didn't. It took me a month before I was ready to walk down the 2 flights of stairs in my house to the gym that I have down in the basement. And when I say the gym, it's not like I was getting back to squats and deadlifts right away.
Of course.
In the hospital, I did PT of, it was standing, it was calf raises, it was walking and learning to walk with assistance and a walker, several different kinds of walkers, and then a cane. At home, that continued with doing sit to stands at my bedside and using a yellow TheraBand, lightest there is. Any PTs, anybody who's been to PT, you've seen a yellow TheraBand, and using that for my hip exercises, and having that be exhausting and painful. So it took a month mentally, again, for me to feel ready enough to come down to the gym. In part, it was because of steadiness on the stairs, but also in large part, it was like, when I come back to this gym, there's no denying the fact that I am not the same person who left here. And I continued the really basic rehab of the sit to stands, and that became goblet squats, just holding a plate, a really light plate. And then that eventually became chair squats with my safety bar. And then it was really light weights on the bar. And then, I was able to get to, I've never been a great great bench presser. I've got really long arms, which is great for deadlifting, not great for bench pressing. But even so, My first bench press back was a whopping 55 pounds. 5 pounds on either side plus the bar. And my wife was there to make sure I didn't die again. And that continued for months. And eventually it looked more and more like modified powerlifting training. And eventually that just looked more and more like the same kind of powerlifting training I was doing before. And always grateful for David, who worked for me in my coaching company as my assistant coach. The backstory is when I became sick, my good friend John merged his business with mine at the request of our mutual mentor, and Dave, along with the other team members, stepped up to help take care of everybody. Dave's also a doctor of physical therapy. He's got experience with people in acute care. And I was struggling to hold myself accountable when I was home to do my rehab. So I asked him, like, Dave, I recognize as maybe a weird request. Like, technically you work for me. Would you be willing to coach me though? And gratefully he accepted that. So between him and my friend John, who merges the businesses, they were my coaches and they guided me back to training. It was early 2024, like February, March, around this time of year, where I started thinking, I'm about ready to sign up for a powerlifting meet and just see what happens. So I signed up for 2 because I'm an overachiever in many of the things that I do in my life, apparently.
Another gift.
It can be. And the first meet was May 24th of 2024, or excuse me, May 25th of 2024. And I went through that day with the most gratitude probably that I've ever had, certainly with powerlifting, but also with many things in life. I hadn't regained all my muscle. I was still lighter than I was before the hospital. We had an idea of how strong I was, but ultimately there's a very real chance that I wouldn't have been there. And I was. So my job was just to have as much fun and be as grateful as I possibly could. My wife and my daughters and my parents were in the crowd, the same people who saw me at my worst, and the same ones who were told to get ready to say goodbye. They were there watching me go out and cheering me on. I went 9 for 9, which in powerlifting is a perfect day. You make all of your lifts successfully. And I deadlifted a lifetime PR of 501 pounds.
Wow.
And then I did it again 3 months later with another lifetime PR of 507 pounds.
And this is all within 12 months or so.
Yeah. The first meet was just over a year after leaving the hospital. And then 3 months after that was meet number 2.
Yeah. Again, for me, I'm putting a visual to what you're saying. And I can see you, at that weight loss. I can see you being lifted out of bed, where a lot of people listening just may not have that same context. So to me, it's just a lot more intense when you're going through that right now. I'm really glad that you brought up a little bit earlier, and I just want to reflect on that a little bit, and that's the mental aspect of it all, because you must have gone through a roller coaster of, you already said that you were starting to feel a little bit depressed while you're doing your treatments and while you were in the hospital. I want you to touch on that a little bit and walk me through that, because what you do today is on the complete opposite spectrum to that. You're basically coaching people, not just physically, but you're coaching them mentally. And I have a few examples that I'm going to cite, but I want you to just walk me through, your initial struggle
Mhm.
mentally with depression and where your mind was at, because I would imagine that you're thinking about yourself, but you're also thinking about your children. You're thinking about your wife. You're thinking about your family. I mean, there's a whole lot there that needs to be put in perspective.
Yeah. You're right about all of it. We'll start with the fact that as I came to grips and got my bearing of what was going on in the ICU, it's a hell of a thing to be conscious and to start to realize just how helpless you are. You can't talk because of the trach. You can't get up out of bed. You are entirely reliant on other people. And, I joked about it. I'm a recovering perfectionist, an overachiever. Like, that's been me all of my life. And I've in that moment, it was absolutely earth shattering, paradigm shifting in the worst way, to go from being self-reliant. I've built my own successful coaching business. I've been a damn good PT, and I'm proud of the work that I do. I can trust my body. I'm raising a family with an amazing woman. I've got great kids. And I wouldn't have told you that I'd made it, but I was proud of a lot of the things that I had been able to do. And then in the ICU, I can no longer rely on my body to do anything. It's a battle, a daily battle, as they try to, manage infections, and I can't do what I want to do. I can't even write a note to my wife to tell her, hey, I love you, I miss you, as her visiting time's up. I don't know if my business exists anymore. This is prior to finding out that it was doing okay, thanks to the actions of some incredible people. I wasn't home to be a present father for my daughters. I wasn't the big, strong dad that they had. And the grief that I experienced starting at that point was unlike anything else I experienced, because it goes right down to your identity. Who am I? If I can't do these things, if I don't look the same, if I don't sound the same, don't have the same ability, don't have the same accolades anymore, who am I? I told you that I told you there was a lot of prayer being offered at the point where I came out of the nosedive. Faith plays a big role for me in my life. And the story of Job in the Bible felt very, very relevant at this point in the story for me, where I was just agonizing, asking the hard questions but the honest ones of why me, God? Did I deserve this? Did I bring this on? Why like this? Such anger and grief and sorrow and all of the things. So what that meant for me mentally was I had to come to the question of, you're not dead yet. No one can tell you how the road ahead is going to look, but it's damn well going to be long. Your wife and daughters are at home. What are you going to do? And I answered that once, as in, I'm not dead yet. That means I'm not done yet.
So you started challenging yourself mentally.
Yeah. It was a singular decision, as well as it had to be a repeated decision that I made day by day and sometimes hour by hour. Because I got to that point in the midst of the grief. It's not like I processed the grief and I was fine with it and I answered all the questions and then everybody clapped. It was in the middle of it, at what felt like rock bottom. And then still coming back to the fact that I had breath in my lungs, Sure, maybe it was helped by some supplemental oxygen, but there's still breath in there. So it meant I still had some fight. And, as we're talking about this, I recognize it's my story. I also recognize that there are going to be people who listen to you and me speaking here who may not have the same drive as I did for knowing my wife and daughters were at home. I was going to do everything in my power to get back to them. Maybe they don't have a family to drive them to do that, or maybe they have a family, but it doesn't have the same impact, or it's not the same sort of relational dynamic. What I also needed to hear, which I'll offer here in case it's useful for people, is that in those deep, dark moments where you don't have like the fire well stoked and you're not like ready to go and bust down doors, when you feel really vulnerable and really weak and you're really not sure if you can keep going, borrowing somebody else's belief that, yeah, things suck right now. And I, speaking right now to you, listener, or you, Albano, like, I don't know when things are going to get better. I wish I did. But what I can tell you is that I believe it's better that you're here. And I'm also willing to, to share my experiences so you don't feel alone. And just having somebody's presence, whether it's a physical presence like the doctors and nurses and my family and the other people who came to visit, or maybe it's from afar, maybe like what we're doing here, just having someone bear witness, having some presence and someone saying like, just hang on. That's part of what helped me get through that. And it's part of what drives me now to offer that message to somebody who needs it now.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. I'm gonna read you a quote, okay? And on the other side of it, I just want you to comment on it, because this is your quote that that I stole, and I'm gonna read it back to you. And it's just fitting because, let me just read it. And then, so when it comes to your profession now and you helping others with physical therapy, I think if somebody is invested in your story and has researched it or follows you, they'll know that your profession right now, as far as I'm concerned, is a little deeper than helping somebody physically. Okay, I think you have a whole different element to this experience that you're offering that maybe somebody else who hasn't been through what you've been through can offer. No fault of their own, obviously, and nobody wants to go through what you've been through, but you just have this certain element that you can offer now because of your past. So here's what you said. My mission as a coach is to help you rewrite the next chapter of your story to be one of strength, hope, and pride. I know the path. I know the path there because I walked it myself and with many others. I'm not promising it'll be easy or quick, but I believe it'll be worth it. So when I saw that, I thought that's really deep, and not a lot of trainers can offer that. So when you wrote that, and maybe now when you're dealing with people and you're helping them, because I think the title that you have is slightly deceiving. I don't think it encompasses all of what you do and what you can offer. You're a physical therapist. I think it's just much deeper than that.
I would agree with you. I'll go out slightly on a limb here, but it's all true. This all undergirds not only what I do and what I'm trying to do, but also who I am, in large part because of, this journey. I was just at a business conference last weekend, and the premise was that business is art, and art is an expression of self. So if that's true, then I have to answer the question of what I'm trying to express and bring into the world through my work and through Unbreakable Strength. For me, it's love and hope. I told you that faith plays a big role for me, and not everybody shares my views, nor do they need to. But I believe that my mission here is to make people feel seen and heard and loved as an extension of God's love. It's kind of wild stuff. Physical therapist, strength coach talking about God's love. But I mean, that's the undergirding belief of it is one of compassion. It's one of hope. And it is what I experienced in the hospital. It's what I've experienced since in some places. It's also what I've seen absent in other places, particularly in medicine and in healthcare. And when it's there, I mean, some of the most profound experiences for me of hope, of pride, of someone reaching out a hand to help me get up when I'm down and just like shake the dust off and figure out, all right, man, it's going to be a messy ride and I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but I'm willing to be here with you, were those doctors and nurses in the hospital. One of them in ICU B, she held my hand and stood by my bedside as I just wept. This doctor, she had a million things she could do, needed to be doing probably at that point in time. She cared about me enough to just stand there and be present.
Let me ask you this. Do you think, having said that, because I'm just reflecting on when I was sick and I had a hematologist that was very, very similar to what you're describing. And I'm just wondering do you think that particular doctor at that time gave you strength?
100%.
Yeah, more than just being a doctor there to comfort you.
I'll upgrade it 1,000%.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable sharing, I'd like to know how it was for you. To me, yes. If she could have, I'm certain she would have made everything better. She would have made me healthy again and gotten me out of the hospital. I'm sure every doctor, or damn near all of them, would love that sort of power. And she didn't have it. But what she did have was the ability to be present and to offer some compassion. The same way that another nurse in the ICU, when I couldn't speak because I had the trach in, she saw me as a human. She didn't just see me as a case. And she asked what kind of music I wanted to listen to. And she took, I forget how long in total, but she let me trace letters on her hand to try to spell out the name of the artist that I wanted to listen to, which at the time was City and Color. And we got it wrong like 7 times, dude. And she didn't get upset. All right, let's try it again. We finally got it, and she put on music. And why did that suddenly cure the HLH? Did that make me better? No, but it was this very clear extension of humanity and care. She cared. She saw me. She did something to make me feel better. And that is love and compassion if I've ever seen it. And that gave me strength.
So I see a lot of this in you. Now I'm going to ask you a question, because when I'm reading your posts or looking at your story or watching your videos, I see that doctor and that nurse and you passing that on to others. Is this something was this your character before you were sick? Or did you learn something while you were in the hospital and decide, you know what? It's so important that when I see people like this, it's my duty to pass that on. Like you said, it's humanity.
Yeah.
Or was this prior to that? Were you like that? Or did this maybe you were like that and this manifested a little bit further, amplified your belief to pass that on?
It was both. It was both. I've always been somebody who is very empathetic. I pick up on people's emotions. A mentor recently described me as a pretty feely guy, and he's right. I feel things very deeply. And I'm also somebody who has made it a point to try to care for the people around him. That's just been the case. Maybe it's also a manifestation of oldest sibling syndrome. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so you kind of got to do that. This experience with HLH. Sorry, let me backtrack. That's been part of my character also because being in healthcare, I think most of us who find our way into some element of healthcare, whether it's medicine, allied health like PT, OT, chiropractic, whatever, we get into this field because we care about people and we want to help. And I don't think you do that unless there's something inbuilt in you to like try to be of service, in large part. Going through all this absolutely amplified this, and it made it deeper. It made it more resonant. Yeah, we haven't talked much about it, and maybe we will, maybe we won't, but this also, sort of collides with a parallel story for me of vision loss. I have another rare disease called choroideremia, or CHM. It's a progressive, incurable disease that leads to blindness. Through that experience, which continues now, I am legally blind. My vision continues to get worse. You want to talk about the mental aspect, both from HLH and this, they definitely have combined. And again, it's been these moments, some of which have come from doctors and other healthcare professionals, some of which have come from just people, where it's an honor to hear you say that you see these elements in me, because it is my mission. It is something that I feel and that I check and work at to make sure that it's coming through. And like anybody else, I'm not perfect at it. But when people in my life have genuinely cared, doesn't mean they've all done grand, absolute life-changing gestures or actions, but sometimes it's just those quiet moments of like just being there with you and holding that space, bearing witness to you, where you are, not immediately trying to go rush and fix things, which has been a tendency of mine in the past. And sometimes it's not about trying to fix things or give advice or have the perfect solution. Sometimes it's just about making sure that someone else knows they're not alone.
Yeah, and I think in today's society, whether you're sick or not sick, there's so many people struggling mentally.
Yep.
And I think sometimes the absence of that comfort is huge. So
Yep.
the opposite of that is to have that comfort. And I think that's what you got at the hospital, and obviously what you're passing on. And listen, from one bearded guy to another, I'm going to tell you that it's beautiful, because
Thank you.
life is just so precious. And, some people, through no fault of their own, just live a nice, cushy life, health-wise, family-wise, finance, and whatever else. And again, that's great. I mean, we want that for everybody. But sometimes things happen to us in life, and that light comes on where things are just a little bit more important, and sometimes they're intangibles.
Yep.
And that's what I see in you. I've listened to, again, you speak with other people, and your physical sickness was always clear and present.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always picking up, and maybe it's because I've been through it,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm picking that up.
Yep.
Again, I haven't been through what you've been through, but I've had my own health challenges.
Yep.
And I just see these things in a different light. Like my perspective is probably a little bit different than the average person. And I'm seeing that in you. And when I look at the way that you post and what you say and how you talk to your clients, um, just the very names that are assigned to you, they're just so fitting.
Mm.
And I just came to know today while we were speaking that Unbreakable was there prior to you getting sick. And I just think that's beyond a coincidence because Unbreakable to me, uh, at the time for you, it was probably a physical thing. I think it became a mental thing and it
Yeah.
became both.
Yes. It sure did. And yeah, on the front end, when I picked that name in 2020, it sounded good. It was better than the other options that I was brainstorming. And it spoke to resilience. It definitely had physical elements because also at the time, the business was focused on helping powerlifters, whether beginner powerlifters or injured powerlifters, and those who were trying to compete at a higher level. And, I was able to work with many. I still do, actually, up to the world level even. Um, and then some of the people who found me in those early days and as time went on were other healthcare professionals, more and more, and people who weren't interested in competitive powerlifting, but they wanted to trust their body again after an injury. They wanted to feel pride in who they were because they were somebody who showed up and put the work in to take care of themselves, even when it was hard. And there was always the mental, um, the mental psychological element and the value. There's always that element, excuse me, to what I wanted to bring to people there, which was very present in my rehab work. I worked in clinics for 6 years before going fully online into my business. And you're also right that it's taken on different dimensions since.
Yeah. Another similarity that I'm drawing a parallel to is that when I finished my treatments, I was very weak and I was looking for somebody to train with to kind of get me back in shape physically. So I think because I think pretty sure I told you that I was having lunch with Dan McAdams a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago. He's a friend of mine for several years, and I actually came to know Dan because after I finished my treatments, he was my trainer. He
Mhm.
was he was my physical therapist and coach and personal trainer, and and I had very weak legs,
Mhm.
and I trained with Dan for a long time, and you coincidentally got help from your trainer. I'm not a physical trainer, but you got help from your trainer.
Yep.
And while I was speaking with Dan last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was that we had lunch,
Mhm.
he said to me that even though he's a personal trainer, that he was struggling with some issues. And he said, I have a really good friend of mine. He was sick. He's been through some stuff. And he said, and this guy just really knows his shit. He doesn't live near me anymore. So I reached out to him and I asked him for help. And he helped me get through some stuff. And he said, his name is Jared. And I'm like, I'm listening to him. And I'm thinking, so he's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And then as he started talking about you going through a few things and everything, and I said, I know exactly who you're talking about. He's like, really? So yeah, it was a good small world.
Yeah,
It's just a small world,
it
you
is.
know.
Dan's fantastic, and I don't think I've had the chance to share with you. He and I first met when we were on our personal training certification course back in whatever year it was, maybe 2012. Um, but yeah, we bonded just shooting the shit over like supplements and other stuff, and been friends ever since. So it is a small world, and he's a phenomenal person and personal trainer.
Yeah, yeah. No, he's a great guy. He actually lives just I don't know. I could probably get to his house in 3 minutes. I mean, he's very
Nice.
close to my place, and so it was just a coincidence. But I found it pretty ironic that it was a circle of you getting help to recover from something from your trainer. I'm getting help from Dan for my sickness. Dan's got some issues and he's a trainer and he's going to you for, so it was just like
Yeah.
a full circle.
Well, and it's amazing when that happens to me. Sorry, when to me, it's amazing when that happens. And I told you that I started Unbreakable to focus on powerlifters, and the people who increasingly found me were other coaches and clinicians. And what I've kept finding is that the coaches and clinicians are the people who take care of everybody else all day long. They deserve and they need somebody to help show up for and take care of them the same way. And another part of my mission is serving these trainers, these coaches, these PTs, chiros, etc. Because when they have their tank more full, somebody's helping them feel better, helping them have more energy, helping them regain trust in their own body, because they are human. I know them because I am them. When they have more of that to give, they then give it to more people and impact more lives and change more lives. And I think that's something that the world needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just paying it forward.
Yep.
Having said that, I mean, there's a couple of words that we've used and you've used to describe yourself, whether it was something that you came up with, like Unbreakable, whether it was the Miracle Man, which you didn't come up with, but the, your doctors and nurses assign that to you because of your obvious resilience and recovery. Another thing that I notice is your passion. And you just have a lot of friggin' passion. Let's face it. I mean, again, I follow you. I see what's going on. And passion is not something you work on. Passion is a gift. Passion is something that's just there. Okay. I don't think, you need an inertia for passion. Where does that come from with you?
I appreciate you saying that. So thank you. It comes down to, or it comes from what I believe about who I am and my identity. I believe I am a child of God. I believe I'm loved, not because of how I look or what I can do or my accolades, but from that identity and that relationship. And I told you that I'll say this, I've gained additional clarity of what I'm trying to do, both as a person and with my business, is help people experience that love. And it may never have overt religious overtones, and that's okay. It may never really be presented on the ground as like love. It might look like, hey man, I'm dealing with this chronic back pain and it's really affecting me this way, this way, this way. Okay. I think I can help. Here's how to look, and knowing that when that improves, you can pick up your kid. You can make memories with your kid. And you can work and provide for your family. And you'll just be a better, happier person. And this is my way of being able to support you. It also comes from having been blessed with these experiences from people, certainly through the HLH arc, and people both in the medical/rehab world and elsewhere. I've been blessed by these people. And I believe it is my duty and calling to pay it forward, imperfect as I am. And, again, for a recovering perfectionist, coming to terms with the fact that, like, I'm going to mess up. I can only do so much on my own. And also having the additional fuel to the fire of very nearly dying. We all know we're going to die. We hear these platitudes of, live every day like it's your last. And I think for most of us, I'll speak for myself. I heard that. I'm like, I never thought it was untrue, but it was, yeah, sure. Okay. And then 5 seconds later, getting caught up with, something that felt important in the moment, but really won't matter in a week, let alone 5 years. on the other side of the hospital, I got the phrase, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but memento mori on my forearm, which is a Latin phrase that means remember you must die. And it's meant to be a reminder that we all, in fact, will die. Nobody makes it out of this world alive. We all think we've got time until we don't. And for some of us, like you and me, we have we have more time than perhaps at one point we thought we would. And I try to remind myself of that nothing's guaranteed. And I want to, when I do finally leave this world, people are better for it. I think it's as simple as that for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great explanation of where the passion comes from, because I mean, in a nutshell, you're just appreciating every day as a gift, and you're thinking it as such, and that's wonderful, and it's wonderful that you're passing that on, because it's contagious. I can see it, and that's why I brought it up, because you're not saying it, I'm just seeing it, you know, and and it's amazing, because I agree with you. The world does need more of it. The world is tough out there, and the world needs more of that for sure. Um, what's the future of Unbreakable?
Yeah. It's exciting for me. Again, coming off that conference last weekend, it was really drilling down into what is the mission? What do I want to bring more into the world? And that's where some of that clarity around love and compassion comes from. So Unbreakable continues to focus on primarily serving coaches and clinicians and helping them not only get stronger and get out of pain, but being able to do that with less decision fatigue and being able to show up for themselves so that they can change more lives. We don't solely work with coaches and clinicians. They are the main focus, but we've still got lots of other folks who come through, competitive powerlifters and people with other goals. So that's going to continue. It's going to grow. I've got an assistant coach named Desiree on board now, which is awesome. She's awesome. I'm going to continue to set up both the team and the systems that we need so that even as my vision degrades, which I can't control, the people that we serve, they're always going to get an amazing experience and their lives get to be impacted positively. And I see a future with in-person events, maybe retreats, maybe physical challenges. That's a newer thing that I've gained more clarity on. And also more speaking, more public speaking in podcast forms and also on stages. I haven't done it yet, but that's part of where I feel called to go, because I don't believe these lessons that I've learned are just for me. So that's where we're focused.
You're on a mission to give back and make this
Sure
world
am.
a better place.
I am, man. Yeah.
I have one more question, and I want you to maybe think about it for a second, because it may or may not be deep. You may look at it and say, "Yeah, I could just spit out the answer." Um, but again, I think I wanted to take this conversation from the start into more of a deeper philosophical, get in your head kind of um, exercise, because that's what I see beyond you helping people with the physical training. Um, and obviously, we needed context and we needed your story, but I really appreciate your mindset. Um, so, beyond the lifting, beyond the sickness, who is Jared Bernard?
He is a beloved child of God who's here both to be loved and to love. Because that is part of what gives life meaning. And he's a husband, he's a father, he's a coach, he's a friend. He is somebody who is scarred, has a lot of scars, and also thinks that scars tell the story of what tried to kill you and lost. And he believes that those scars and those stories and those lessons can all be used, if one chooses, to make meaning and to help people and to share that love with others, which all end up being an expression of the love that God has for him first.
It's very well said. I think that I think the world needs more people like you. I think the people around you are very fortunate and blessed to have you in their life. Um, I'm sure that you only draw really powerful people, positive people, because that's the energy you give. And I actually feel very honored that you would share some time with me to get to know you on a little deeper level beyond powerlifting and beyond your daily work and beyond your sickness that you were forced to deal with. And it really means a lot to me. So I really do appreciate it. And I think I want to probably congratulate you because like you're a special person. So good for you.
Thank you, Albano. I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I hope we speak again. Unless there's
Yeah.
anything that you wanted to add or maybe something I missed before we cut out.
No, just gratitude. Thank you for the invitation, for your time, and it's mutual. And I'm glad that I know we mostly focused on my story here. I got to read and understand some of yours beforehand. I'm just grateful for this conversation, this time. And yeah, I'd love to do it again. So you let me know and we'll run it back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Have an awesome rest of the day, week, year, and many blessings for you and your family.
Thank you very much, man. Same to you and yours.
All right.